What is up, guys? Welcome to another video. Another video means another dopamine hike. Said to buy something to feel something, and today we're taking a look at another figure review. The figure in question is NECA's Lasershot Predator. This is a very interesting looking figure with a lot going on. Now, before we get into anything else, if you do want to pick one of these guys up yourself, I got mine at Target, but unfortunately he is not on the Target website. But if you do find him at Target, he goes for $36.99, but you can get him at the Big Bad Toy Store for $41.99 and on Amazon for $48.90. so you do have those online options nonetheless. But I can guarantee you, if you look hard enough, you will find one at Target. And for those wondering the origins of the Lasershot Predator, he was originally a figure made by Kenner in 1994 when Kenner did all the Predator figures. He's not from any comics or media though, but despite that, he does have some backstory. So I'm going to briefly run that by you guys. And for those who are interested in the lore segments, there are chapters, so you can skip right to the review. But for those who are interested in the lore, the Lasershot Predator was considered an anomaly amongst his species. He was known for his biomechanical enhancements, and he grew obsessed with surgically altering himself, essentially turning himself into a living weapon. He had very little interest in his species' traditional weapons. Rather, he favored the mass array of weapons that he made himself. Growing up, he had very little interest in predator culture and traditions, and he devoted much of his time to building, his weapons and altering himself. His work did reach the attention of Spiked Tail and the Armored Lost Predator, making the Lasershot a valued member of the Rogue Space Tribe. And that is pretty much everything we know about the Lasershot Predator. So with all that said, now we can move on to the review. So looking at the box, we can see the Lasershot Predator with everything included. We can get some artwork of him. We have just the figure printed on the front with some included features mentioned. On the side, we have the Ultimate Alien Hunter Predator and of course the Lasershot Predator's name. We have some photos of the boy, which is always good to see, and then a brief description of what he is all about. But I've already done the lore segment, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we have some included features and how they work on the bottom. On the side, we've already seen this. And then opening up the box, we do get to see the artwork once again, and then the Armored Lost Predator and Spiked Tail, and then of course the actual figure that we are reviewing with everything included. So just opening up the box just to get that first impression on the visuals, and I can say so far, visually at least, everything is looking good. There's a lot of stuff to go over, so with all that said, let's get into it. So starting off with articulation in the head region of the figure, you can get him to rotate his head 360 degrees, which is always awesome to see there. And then you can have him kind of tilt his head side to side, not by a lot, but the movement is still there nonetheless. And then you can also have him tilt his head up and down, and the movement is there, just not by a lot, but it's still good to have that range of motion on the figure. So overall, pretty alright head articulation. And then bringing it over to the arms, you can rotate them 360 degrees, which is always awesome to see on these figures. When it comes to flapping or bringing up the arm, the shoulder does clash with the shoulder piece just a little bit, so that range of motion is still there, but it is kind of limited. And that same principle applies to flapping open or having the arm open from the side. And then the elbow articulation, you can bring the forearm up a decent amount, about 95% of a shoulder tap, like it's almost there. So even though the gauntlet is clashing with the shoulder piece, that range of motion is still really good. You can rotate the forearm 360 degrees if you wanted to as well. And then when it comes to the hand, you can obviously rotate it 360 degrees and bend however you please. So that, the same old with the hands on NECA figures. And just briefly bring it over to the other arm, you can have him do a complete shoulder tap because the gauntlet on that side isn't clashing with the shoulder piece. And overall, despite the limitations in the shoulders, this figure does have good arm articulation. Taking things over to the torso, you can rotate his upper half and his stomach 360 degrees if you wanted to, and then you can have him lean back and forth a decent amount. By no means is it a crunch, but it's good to have that range of motion there nonetheless. And then you can have him do a all-around pivot, wibble wobble kind of motion, which is really good for balancing and posing your figure. And finally, taking a look at the legs, you can't really have him do a split because his waist piece does limit how far you can bring up his legs. so that is a little unfortunate there, but you can rotate his legs 360 degrees nonetheless, so that articulation is there. It's just the waist piece limiting how much he can move his legs. And then when it comes to the knees, you can have him do, I want to say maybe 50-60% of a butt kick. The leg armor does limit how much you can, fold up his legs, and then you can rotate his feet 360 degrees and pivot them however you please for balancing and posing reasons. So when it comes to my overall verdict on the Lasershot Predator's articulation, I would have to say it's not terrible by any means. There are definitely figures out there with worse articulation, so this guy doesn't have terrible articulation, but I think we can fairly say in the terms of what is considered average articulation for a Predator figure, this guy is just under average, just by a little bit though, because he limits himself in his knees because the knees clash with the leg armor. There's the upper thigh clashing with the waist piece, and then the shoulders clashing with the shoulder armor. And I'm not saying like he can't move those parts of his body, because he can, it's just not as much because of his armor. So that's why I would probably rate his articulation overall just under average for a Predator figure, but like I said, not terrible by any means. And with articulation now out of the way, we can move things over to accessories and features included. And getting into the first feature included, and that is his light up bionicle eye. It activates via a button on the top of his head. You can press the button and the eye will just stay on for as long as you hold the button, or if you push down the button hard enough, the light will just stay on. And I think that's just a really cool accessory that kind of adds to his character. And then of course we have the biomask that every Predator wears, and it kind of just pops onto his face. There's no swappable head with this figure, and it also allows you to still see his light up eye if you wanted to have that on while he wears his mask. And I actually kind of like the design of his biomask. It's very different, it's very busy looking, there's so much going on, and I just think that's really cool. Then bringing it over to his gauntlet, there is this little crystal kind of piece that attaches, and you just put the peg in the peg hold, and it just kind of sits there, and it looks kind of cool. It adds some contrast to his color palette. And for those who are wondering what this piece is, well, actually it's a device, and that device in question is a shield. And I think it's really cool that NECA gave us the option to display our figure with the shield on or off. That sense of choice really adds to the whole playability factor and the overall value of the figure, because the more accessories and the more choices we have, I feel like the better the figure for the most part. And I really like how this shield looks, how it's transparent, adds that plasma effect. Kind of reminds me of a Jackal shield from Halo. So I really like what NECA did and how they handled the whole shield gauntlet situation. And taking things over to the back, we can see that our figure comes with these large back mounted cannons that you can slide up and down, so you can either have them in a neutral or action state, which I think is really cool to see. And then we can see that one of these cannons is just a massive plasma caster, and this thing looks mean. I like the attention, the detail on this, all the busy little lines and indents going on. And you can kind of move this plasma caster. It is on a ball joint, so you can get some posability out of it, but not a whole bunch. But overall, a very cool looking plasma caster. Taking things over to the other side, there is this massive cannon that is not a plasma caster, but what it is a chain shot cannon, or a cannon that shoots a chain, whatever you want to call it. But there's a chain included that you just plug into the front end, and it looks like the cannon is shooting out this massive chain that you can manipulate because there's the wire in there, and you can bend it pretty much however you want. There's not really that much limitation on the bendability of this chain, which is always awesome to see. And there's actually only one downside to this chain. It all starts with these two pieces. These two pieces are meant to go on the other end of the chain, so it looks like the Lasershot Predator is shooting out a chain to either pierce or grab something. But unfortunately, they do make the chain top heavy, and it's already kind of bad that the chain is so long and thin, and just adding these two heavy pieces at the end of it just kind of make the chain even more limp than it already is. So it sucks to see that, especially because there's so much that goes into this chain system. His main weapon is those shoulder cannons, and it sucks that we can't have him displayed looking like he's shooting the chain out at something. So despite the chain being a complete flop, moving on to the hands included, we have 2 open hands, one for his organic hand and one for his bionicle hand, and then 1 closed fist, and there is another hand included, and it is this massive claw, and I think this implies that his bionicle hand transforms into this giant claw hand, and there's actually articulation in this hand. The fingers can move, so you can rotate them, so you can have him grab things and whatnot. And I think this giant claw hand does a really good job at emphasizing how much of a living weapon he actually is, and yeah, I think that is everything included with this figure. And here we are discussing the visual presentation of the Lasershot Predator. Now, the only thing I want to get out of the way, the only thing that I think some people will dislike about this character's visuals is the screw on the top of his head, because it does stick out like a sore thumb, but at the end of the day, that screw has to be there so we can access the batteries for his light up eye. But after that, I think that is the only issue I can really think of when it comes to this figure's visual presentation. And starting off with sculpting, I think NECA did a phenomenal job at sculpting when it comes to this figure. You can see all the bumps and the wrinkles and the fleshy bits on his skin. You can see his veins. All of it looks really good, and it looks like it's organic, and it looks like it's alive, and it's just something that NECA is really good at nailing. And even with the cybernetics and his armor, you know, you can see all the bits of technology. You can see how busy it looks, how advanced it looks. There's so much going on with all the lines and the textures. It just, NECA did a phenomenal job at capturing within this figure. And then discussing the paint job, I think NECA did a phenomenal job at capturing the original image of the Lasershot Predator, you know, with the purple contrasting with all the brass and gold, and then of course there's the red brownish dreadlocks contrasting with the skin and the armor. So I think they did a phenomenal job at handling all these colors that contrast with each other, and if anything, they really complement each other. They really make each other stick out, and in a way that makes them work as a team, because you can see the different shades of purple that, you know, add character. And, you know, it'd just kind of be gross if he was just one shade of purple. It just kind of take away some of the detail that we see on his skin. And that same principle applies to the armor, the different shades of gold and brass that play with each other and contrast, that allow for the finer details to pop out. Just, I really love how they handled the paint job on this figure. But I think y'all have heard enough of me shilling on why I think this figure looks really good. I always go over and rant about why I think NECA figures look really good. That's a common theme on this channel if you haven't caught on already. So let's move on to some size comparisons just to put this bad boy into scale. Starting off with a Xenomorph Warrior, and we have Hasbro's Star Wars The Black Series Shore Trooper, Jazzwares Halo The Spartan Collection Rogue Spartan, Jazzwares The World of Halo Halo Infinite Master Chief, and finally we have McFarlane's The Doomslayer. Here we are at the turntable segment of the video. This is where I go over what I like and dislike, and just general, you know, thoughts I have about this figure, and getting into what I think are the weaknesses, cons, dislikes, whatever you want to call it first about this figure, just to get that sour stuff out of the way first, and getting into the big one first, and that is the chain and how it doesn't want to stay up. And that really sucks because there is a huge emphasis on this chain. You know, for God's sake, there's an entire cannon mounted on his back so he can shoot this chain out, and because of how, you know, flimsy and limp it wants to be, we can't even pose it where it looks like he's shooting it in midair. And you know the amount of love that went into this, because you know you can move it around, have it, you know, kind of, you know, move. It's a chain, it's not supposed to be shot straight, you know, you're supposed to have it move around and whatnot. And you know, there's different ends to it as well, so you know, there was that layer of, you know, customization, and you know, we can't really take advantage of any of that because of how limp the chain wants to be, which sucks. And the only other thing that really comes to mind, and I don't think this is really a deal breaker on the figure, but you know, the limitations seen due to his armor. Now, like I said before, this doesn't make the articulation terrible at all. It just kind of makes it a little below average for a Predator figure, because you know, normal Predator figures can move those parts really well, and because of his armor there is limitations, which sucks to see, but it's not really a deal breaker and doesn't really ruin the figure. Overall, just kind of brings his value down just a wee bit. Getting into the strengths, likes, pros, whatever you want to call it, of this figure, starting off with the amazing visual presentation we get with most NECA figures. It is most definitely seen here, as you heard in the visual presentation segment of the video. I love the amount of care and effort they put into this figure, and they really did this guy justice, and I really can't get over just how much I love how he looks. And then the other thing that does come to mind is the amount and variety of accessories and features that come with this figure. That is definitely one one of the pluses of the Predator figures, especially them being almost $40, is not only do they look really good and for the most part feel really good, but they come with a lot of accessories. Like with this boy, he has his back launchers, he has the chain, he has the chain head so you can have him look like he's about to grab or, you know, pierce something. There's the shield, there's the claw hand, there's even the fist for the organic hand so you can swap out his organic hands as well. And there's just so much included, you know, that, and it just caters towards, you know, playability, allows you to just have the freedom for more options to choose how you display your figure. And I bet toyographers really love it when there's all these options and just things to choose from when it comes to a figure, because they're allowed to get more photos out of that said figure. So I think that's just another thing this figure does really well, is just give us a bunch of options and a bunch of accessories to play with and just work with, and it's just something I really love to see. And then getting the things I feel like that are to be desired from this figure, starting off with the chain. I wish the wire inside of it was made out of a stronger material, something that could support its own weight and not allow the chain to go limp very easily. And then the only other thing that really comes to mind is, you know, I wish this figure would take full advantage of its articulation, because I know Predator figures have really good articulation as it is, and it really sucks to see when one does limit itself because of, you know, its armor. Not saying that the armor is bad or anything, because, you know, the armor does look very cool. It just sucks that it limits a figure that should have really good articulation. For 15 minutes, I've been trying to properly articulate my words so I can give you a final verdict on this figure, but for some reason I can't. My brain is not working. So rather than trying to articulate my words perfectly to give you a final verdict, I'm going to give this figure a rating. I know I don't do that, but just my brain is melting. My final verdict is that this figure is a 7.5 out of 10, a low 8 on a good day. Take that as you will. Let's move on to the outro. So if you have this figure already, please tell me down below, do you like or dislike this figure and why? Let's create a discussion, get that ball rolling. I like talking about this stuff, so I will most likely reply to your comments down there. And if you did like this video, like and subscription would be awesome. You don't have to comment because that's a lot of effort, I get it, but like I said, you're more than welcome to go down there and converse about anything that I've talked about in this video, and I will most likely will respond to your comment because I like, you know, responding to feedback and just talking about this stuff. And don't worry about the bell, we both know that shit is broken. And if you want to see more stuff like this up on the channel, there is plenty of it. I have already reviewed a handful of Predator figures, but I also review Star Wars and Halo stuff as well. If any of that interests you, more than welcome to go check that out. And with all that said, please have a wonderful day and please stay hydrated, it's important.